Hi everyone, Ian Aldridge here from Progressive Legal CPD. We're here today talking with Ben Deverson from Lawganised. Thanks so much for joining us today, Ben, and giving up your valuable time. I know it is extremely valuable at the moment, helping law firms through this current environment. Appreciate you coming on the webinar.
Thanks, Ian. Absolute, my pleasure.
And so for everyone listening, this is a pre-recorded webinar. We'll obviously be sending this out to you once we've uploaded it onto the website. But Ben has got an amazing history. I just want to go through that quickly with you first, Ben, so people can kind of get an idea of what your background is and your experience. So so you joined Army and for 7 years, and then was a commissioned officer in the Army was it for 7 years?
That's about right. Yeah, about 7 or 8 years. Yeah.
And then after that, so very skilled in dealing with people and people with issues and motivation and motivating people to get the job done, and with a large sort of team of people and making sure that all that sort of coordination happens. So that in and of itself is some amazing experience. But then you obviously went into City Street, as they say, and as general manager for the Gasfields Commission and River City Motorway, and then even after that was a non-practicing partner of a law firm for 4 years. Even after that, so in terms of your experience, as a and so the experience that you had with operations management and that sort of stuff even before a law firm obviously has helped you massively with then operating a law firm from a financial and operations and human resources perspective.
Yeah, so my role post the Army was initially I worked with Ernst & Young, the Big Four accounting firm, and I was with them for about 5 or 6 years, initially starting in an HR management role and then moving on to a practice management role, and then moved on to one of their competitors, BDO, the accounting firm, where I was the chief operating officer, and again, similarly, operations and management of a large sort of 400-person accounting firm. And really, professional services is essentially about people. That's the product that you have, the quality of your people, and after that, I did a few commercial roles, as you mentioned, River City Motorway, Gasfields Commission, and then went into the chief executive role of a law firm, which ended up being a partnership opportunity. So after a few years of that, I thought I would move on and do my own consulting arrangement with Lawganised. But yeah, these times are fairly unprecedented. But from a management and leadership perspective, I've probably seen a few things. I've been through those of us who can remember the days of the GFC, and even beyond that, I was involved in River City Motorway, which, if you remember, the original owners of the Clem 7 tunnel, they went into receivership not long after the tunnel was constructed. I was in the executive team there, and we obviously went through a significant change process, not only with the tunnel and the fact that it was a significantly overvalued asset. We also had 170 staff that were looking to their executives, wondering what job they had tomorrow. So it's a little bit similar to what we're facing at the moment.
And so with obviously with the firm before you started Lawganised, you obviously were able to help that firm a lot from all that sort of practice management and process and procedures and people and all the non-legal type work. So I'm sure that that experience is going to come out through this webinar. And obviously since then with Lawganised, you're now specifically helping law firms with all their structure and revenue streams and profitability and lockup and financials and pivoting and all this stuff that's now happening in this environment too. I just kind of wanted to give everyone a bit of a background of where you kind of come from and what your experience has been before we dig in. And I know that we're going to be covering a lot in this webinar today because there's a lot to get through in terms of leadership and what small businesses small practices or practices generally, I would imagine need to be doing right now in this current environment, or at least thinking about and being conscious of it, the management of people in a remote setting, all these and tips and tricks. I'm sure you've got a Santa sack full of tips and tricks. So I know we're going to dive in. It's going to be fairly sort of conversational webinar, this one. I've got a list of questions that I've got here to ask you. And obviously I'll chime in as well with some questions from being a law firm owner myself. Absolutely. And having to pivot very fast over the last few weeks and advising clients that are doing the same and going through a lot of challenges. And of course, there's a lot going on right now, and a lot's happened just in the last month, obviously. And March seemed to be 265 days long itself, for sure. What are you seeing out there in the legal market at the moment? I know you've got a lot of firms that you help at the moment that are guiding through this process. And what impacts is COVID-19 having?
Look, I think it's certainly a varied response, but I would say as a general comment that there is seldom an industry, let alone the legal industry, that is not being affected by COVID-19. And I think it's a fairly obvious comment, but when it comes to the legal market, it will really depend on the practice areas of a particular firm. So, for instance, if you are practicing in criminal law, for instance, I have seen and heard anecdotally a lot of the criminal law firms have taken a significant dive with the courts closing and a lot of their proceedings being pushed back. And I've had conversations with a range of different principals of law firms, ranging from, particularly as you said, March was a 265-day month. There was so much change happening every single day. So between February and March is 2 completed months. I had a conversation with a lawyer yesterday who said that his fees dropped 90% between those 2 months. And it's one of those things where the analogies are falling off a cliff and those sort of things come to the fore. So again, when you explore further, the practice area will certainly be affected. I've read some good articles in the last few days about various areas of law. So I think, and some of my contacts in the construction area would suggest that a lot of their work is drying up. So it's yet to be really felt. But there's also some, you might argue, some unfortunate outcomes, albeit in a positive sense for the practice area. So unfortunately, people are seeing an increase in potential family law issues, which is, I guess, a bit of a negative outcome. But, those sort of things happen. And even in the PI space, the guys who I speak to in PI are saying that they won't expect to see a major impact for potentially a year. And the reason being is people are isolated now. They're not having accidents. So they're going to see their work dry up in 6 to 12 months when the injuries that would have occurred during a normal economy no longer happen. So it really does depend on the practice area.
If you're doing wills right now, it sounds as if wills are very popular right now. Everyone's suddenly aware of their morbidity.
Yeah, I think that in the commercial space, a lot of people are being asked to review contracts to understand what issues might arise from force majeure or any sort of limitations issues. But I think one of the biggest issues in general, regardless of the law or legal industry, is just uncertainty. And the uncertainty comes from just not knowing how long this is going to go for. A lot of people are really hedging their bets on things like JobKeeper and some of the government stimulus packages, which are great. And, again, to use your reference to March, I think April is going to be a really long month to get through from a cash perspective. Yeah. Because JobKeeper will start making payments in May, albeit backdated to the 30th of March. Getting through April as a practice with cash that's fairly light is going to be quite difficult. So, and we'll probably go through some of those things a little bit later, Ian, but I think uncertainty breeds an enormous amount of anxiety and stress. And for a business like mine, and my business was started last year purely on the platform of creating certainty for people like you, to give your firm certainty in knowing where your business is going and what practice areas are going to survive in the long term, and what automation can bring you efficiency, and what a practice management can do for your reporting. Uncertainty is an enormous example of stress and anxiety for anyone. And the uncertainty creates sometimes some poor decision making, and again, we'll probably go into that. So we need to think long term here, but I think there's seldom a firm watching this recording today, Ian, that will not have some form of pain.
So when you're talking about poor decisions, just to jump in and hone in on that, what are the poor decisions that you think some small law firms would be making right now if they're sort of knee-jerk reactions? Because obviously there's a lot of people on social media that have had businesses in the past and businesses through the GFC saying, look, you've got to cut hard and cut fast and cut deep, and do that now. And look, everyone's got an opinion, as the old phrase goes, but and as you were kind of alluding to before, there's pockets and bits of businesses that are kind of they're doing. And I've heard that there's businesses that are doing well that you wouldn't have thought necessarily they would be doing well in this time, and others that you think they'll do well in this time, but because people are isolated or this, that, and the other, that's not an option right now. So with everyone, obviously there's a lot of opinions out there, and people are having to make snap decisions really quickly when they're seeing this enormous, like for instance, the 90% drop in revenue instantaneously. I imagine a lot of people would be freaking out about that.
Yeah, and look, poor decisions is probably the wrong phrase to use, and I think that when I make that comment, I talk about perhaps a decision made, and as to use your phrase, in a knee-jerk reaction. I think the point I'm alluding to there is that a pandemic is, in many respects, by definition, temporary, we would hope, and there will be a post-COVID-19 environment. And the concern I have with some of the decisions I'm hearing, and this is again anecdotally through my network, is that there are firms that are now isolated, and they would have staff that potentially don't have the ability to really operate or make an effective contribution from home. And that is absolutely the case. And there would be certain roles. Let's assume that your firm's large enough to have a catering manager, or a receptionist on the front desk. Now, I have heard of firms who have made those positions redundant, and it does make me wonder, when they reopen, what do they do? And they may have to incur time and cost in recruitment to recruit those people who are most likely going to get another role, or at least search for another role. Whereas when I have been advising my clients on these decisions, it's more about, let's think long term, let's think long game. And there are provisions, there are amendments being made to relevant legislation like the Fair Work Act as it relates to particular awards that would suggest there are other decisions that can be explored. I'm not suggesting they're the ones that have to be made, but for instance, standing an employee down for a temporary basis, potentially unpaid, and then they could potentially be eligible, or your workplace could be eligible for the JobKeeper payment, would mean that you could keep that experience and keep that person employed, and then return when things come back to normal. But to make a very long-term decision now, in light of some very recent events, I would just encourage people to pause and think about the long game. And that goes into other decisions like, wholesale cuts to major investments and operational expenditure. Yes, I have advised on those things. I have gone through P&Ls with my clients and put big red pen lines through certain expenditure items. And that is acceptable in my view, because you have to ask what's the return on that investment. Now, it's not going to be carte blanche across the entire P&L, because there's certainly things that you must maintain. If you've got, potentially terabytes of data stuck into a practice management system, I would certainly recommend you don't cut that system off. Things like that. There are things you must invest in and maintain investment in, but there are things that you could look at, again, short term and re-engage longer term. So that's my point there. And, people have made some decisions which, in hindsight, I've now probably labelled as poor. I don't hold any ill will towards anyone who's done that, because they made the best decision that they could at the moment. But I would just encourage people to pause and think long term.
Yeah, well, I'll be the first to say that I've made plenty of bad decisions. So, yeah, that's just the nature of being a small business owner, and we're no different to another small business owner. And you make the decisions with the best available information that you have at the time.
Absolutely.
And obviously, with this type of shock and scenario that's been presented to us very, very quickly in a very fast changing environment, and with and having to look after clients at the same time that are going through this, we really need to make sure that we look after ourselves through this too. And that's really what this webinar is all about, just having a think about, okay, making these decisions and being really considered. Know that you're going to have to make fast decisions, but being able to make those in the best possible way, and think through perhaps the longer term strategies. If you haven't spoken with your accountant, obviously, we're not, we're not financial advisors, but, or tax advisors. That's for sure. And that's what your accountant's for.
Yep.
But if anyone hasn't spoken to their accountant already, obviously that's something that I think people should be jumping on straight away, to have a look at their budget, their P&L, see what the numbers are doing, and be really proactive and on the front foot in that regard, to see what are their fixed and variable costs, what can they, and as soon as this came out, I think because I'd been through something like the GFC, I knew if something like this were to happen again, that's kind of, I had prepared myself in my own mind to jump on it quickly, to work out what areas are going to do well, perhaps to look at targeting those clients, to look at having a look and seeing what stuff is going to work in this sort of environment, and working out how long it's going to take, looking at the costs very, very, very carefully, and chatting and getting some focused advice as soon as possible from experts like yourself on how to get through this and how to survive this period, so that then at the other end you can thrive in this post-COVID-19 environment, which obviously, if people want to be business owners, like law firm owners, want to be prepared for that, I'm guessing that where you're going with all this is to be prepared for it. You need to start now, so that you've set up all the you've got all your ducks in a row, so that when things do pick up again, then you're in the best possible position for that, and not look back and say, oh, I shouldn't have done that. With the benefit of hindsight, I shouldn't have made that decision. I shouldn't have sacked that person. I shouldn't have done this. I should have just paused and taken a breath and thought that through a little bit better.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about the GFC. I did operate in the large accounting firm space back then, and the large, well, the bigger end of the market when it came to professional services really struggled through the GFC, and I did see some large firms make rationalisations to the tune of 15-20% of staff. So, seeing 60, 70 people walk out the door on one Friday afternoon, only to then be rehired or have at least 70 roles available in 12 months' time. So, again, the payroll cost of 70 staff is phenomenal. I'm not suggesting that a business can absorb that for 12 months, but at the moment there are other options available to you, and you hit the nail on the head, Ian. You must ride your accountant as hard as you can, and your other advisors, to ensure that every single drop of every single penny can be used to support your business. If that means the first stimulus, the job keeper packages, whatever loans that you can do, and get access to whatever loans you can stop with your current business banking arrangements, all those various things. I would be just putting the point to your accountant, what do I need to do to have my doors open and my lights on in January 2021? And give them that directive, and let them explore that. And, if you've got a good accounting firm or accountant like what I have, who's constantly talking to you about, these are the things you can access, and being proactive and offering you those solutions and how you can actually apply for them and where you need to register, and getting all that in front of you is really important. You really need to be advisors, and it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a very big wake-up call for a lot of law firm owners, perhaps how much they need to understand their numbers and perhaps don't understand their numbers as they should, and perhaps being too concentrating on doing the legal stuff and the rest kind of taking care of itself. And maybe it's going to force a lot of people into really carefully looking at all the pennies to see where they can reduce some of their costs, and what they should be reducing in what amounts, and to make sure that the long-term survival and viability of the business is secured, just like it is with any other business. Because unfortunately, law firms are not recession-proof. That might be said of medical practices, that's for sure. But it's not for law firms. We know that, especially when it affects various industries where law firms have a particular specialty. So those businesses those law firms that are acting specifically act for restaurants and those such businesses that have really been hit very, very hard. Would be suffering immensely right now. So. And law firms are having to pivot really fast in terms of their offerings, their service offerings, if they want to make sure that they can last through this and come out the other side and be stronger.
Absolutely.
And do you think do you think this will be a really sort of big test for law firms, and whether it's going to sort out the sheep from the goats, over this time?
Look, that is a really good question, and it sort of comes down to, what will the resilient firms be doing right now? And I think that the key things really would be, I'll probably summarise it into 4 areas, and that is tuck in your people, and ensure that you've got the capability long term. And we sort of talked about some skills before and what needs to come to the fore. I think leadership is going to be a really important one for small practices and the managing partners of firms that can really get their people behind them and understand the pressure that everyone's facing. But I also would highly recommend that at the moment, communication has to be done inverted commas, face-to-face. And it obviously means Teams and Zoom or whatever tools you use. Second of all, tuck in your clients, and that means having I'd get out your CRM or your phone list or whatever and just start ringing them with a simple question: are you okay? And is there anything that we can do to assist? And I'm not talking about trying to find work. I'm thinking it's an altruistic approach. Understand where your clients are currently sitting, what needs they might have, and help them. They will remember you for it, again, longer term. But I also think that the firms that are going to be separate the what was your analogy? The
sheep from the goats.
Sheep from the goats is those who take the time now to clean house. And we've all got pebbles in our shoe in our business. And it's the things that you've just put up with for years. It's that filing room, full of Grace Records boxes that you have been meaning to either get scanned or archive or whatever. Or it's something to do with an efficient process you've been desperately trying to put in place.
Yeah.
If you're having
Implementing that CRM, that you were gonna
correct,
do
and
for a long time.
yeah, and again, think long term. And I'm making these assumptions on the basis that there is a reduction in work that's coming in the door. So don't see that for that gentleman I referred to who told me he had a 90% drop in fees. Now you've got 90% more time potentially. And if you're the owner of a practice, you're not just going to shut the door and walk out. You're going to dig deep, and you want your practice to survive. So I'll be using the 90% of my day to do these things. Make sure that my people are tucked in. My clients are all aware that we're still here and we're still here to help them. That I look around my firm and I go, I need to get this fixed up, because when we start hitting 120% again, I don't want to be running through deep sand like I have been the last 7 years.
Yeah.
And again, that last point is just do not be afraid to ask for help. And every business is asking for it. When you think about JobKeeper extends to businesses that turn over no more than $1 billion, and there are provisions for businesses that are over $1 billion. I'm not sure what the numbers are, Ian, but I'm pretty sure most law firms in this country don't do $1 billion turnover.
I'll let you know when I'm there.
Yeah, well, I know you're close, but
I wish.
You need to put your hand up, and now is not the time to let ego get in the way and say, I can't ask for help. I need someone to help me. Put your hand up and ask for it. And there is no shame in that, because at the end of the day, you are, again, looking forward and wanting your firm to succeed and thrive in the future. So I think that the firms that really dig deep now in those 4 areas, I think will be the ones that, stand above the rest.
Yeah. And so just on that point, when you were talking about, because you've covered a few points there. One was the leadership. One was, talking to the clients and being, I guess the kind of voice of reason for them, right, to be there. And show that leadership, show that stability to your clients, and say, we are here for you in the good times and the bad times. No one likes picking up the phone to their lawyer in the best of times.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that even just that sort of contact, and I suspect most law firms, it's a good time to be doing that if they haven't done that already now, because the shock of March is over, hopefully, and now it's into, okay, what do we need to do now? Planning, moving forward, being positive. We're going to talk about all these positives, in the rest of this webinar as well, because it's not all doom and gloom. There's going to be lots of opportunities for lots of law firms to really do well out of this, if they play their cards right, and they do. I think they do the right things, and there's no manual for all this. It's all new, uncharted territory. So, I'm sure there's going to be a few key things that if law firms do these few key things right, they've got a much better chance of not just surviving, but actually coming out with a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
At the end of this.
And I think that phone call to clients is vital, because at the end of the day, whether you're a lawyer or an accountant or whatever professional service you offer, what you want to be is their trusted advisor.
Yeah.
A trusted advisor, to me, not only provides that advice, but equally can give them advice on where they need to go. So I might talk with you, Ian, you say, Ben, I can't help you with that, but I've got a great guy who I use, and he is a financial planner, or he is a town planner, or whatever your service that you know. If you reach out to all your clients and just ask that simple question, how are you going? How is your business going at the moment? Is there anything that maybe you could just want to run past me? But equally, offer that vulnerability yourself, and feel free to say to them, our firm's struggling as well. We're in this with you. You could be a local business in a regional area and everyone knows you. I'm happy to sit there and say right now, yes, Lawganised has had a drop in revenue. I have taken the pain that my clients are experiencing as well, and I've gladly done that. I've offered free services. I have reduced fees, as I said. I have deferred my fees and those sort of things. We've all got to do that, but it does take some pain to do. But equally, again, playing the long game, I've got long-term relationships that I'm building that I want to see long-term. So I think that phone call, you will learn a hell of a lot, not only about your relationship with that client, but equally about how you might help them that may not actually be delivered by you.
And perhaps if they've got a lot of clients, I appreciate people would have had a lot of clients, and maybe picking out a handful, 20, 50, 100 of their more favorite clients. If they have a look at the 80-20 rule, at the clients in the business that bring them sort of 80% of the revenue, there might be 20% of your clients bringing you 80% of the revenue, and maybe just starting with those, with that 20% just to start off with, and and even if it's just calling 5 or 10 or 15, 20 or more a day, as many as you can do. Literally just saying, hey, you may get their voicemail, but I'm sure they'd appreciate them, just even the voice message.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there will be a lot of businesses out there, particularly those that have been forced to shut down. Getting a phone call like that with a simple and no agenda. Are you okay? Is there anything that you need right now that's really a really pressing issue? Because even if I can't do it, I might know someone who can. And there is enormous amount of generosity being offered at the moment. So again, there is no shame in asking for help.
And even that sort of non-legal advice, and maybe even someone where, we're looking to get into this space. Oh, I know someone in that space. As well, and being able to connect those people during this time, and being that trusted advisor, not just for legal advice, but for business relationships, and being that sort of connector, because obviously.
Sorry, you used the right word before. Pivot. If one of your clients is looking to pivot, then you might have the connections and the direction and the support to help them do that. It's one of those things where they might be saying, I might need to take on an entire new product line. Now, one of your other clients might be already in that space, or you might have an advisor that advises to that space. And before you know it, you've connected them. And they'll always remember you for that. And you become the sort of the cog in the center of their wheel that they always bring in for that advice.
The go-to person, whether it if you've got an issue or they need a connection or something like that, you're the go-to person for for their business and getting sticky with their businesses, right?
Exactly right.
Being like a piece of software as a service that they can't cancel.
100%. I like that idea.
and I guess as well they would, I know that I know I do. I remember people that were there when in the hard times.
Absolutely.
And people show you their true colors in those times. They obviously people get under a lot of stress and all the rest, and act a little differently than what they would do in other sort of more fair times and fair weather times. But those, or fair weather friends, you know who they are. But when the chips are down, as the Joker says, people show you who they really are. And people will realize who are the strong ones through this, and who are the trusted advisors, and who are the ones that can hold themselves together under this type of pressure and the enormous pressure.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
And I suppose, just while thinking of it, even if businesses, if law firms wanted to do just a quick video to their database without having to call every single one of them, you could do a video saying, we just wanted to let you know we understand how hard it is right now, and have that. I'm sure they would appreciate the one-on-one contact a lot more, but at least at least something is better than nothing, to let them know you are still open. This is what you're doing. This is what it's like for everybody else. We are all in this together, and open the door, leave it open to say, if you need anything, just even for just a chat, just let me know, drop me a line or give you a call, and make it as easy as possible for them to reach out to you, even if it's just to say hi.
Yeah, exactly. And whilst I take your point that is certainly not intended to be a marketing exercise, the thing is that it is, and it's a fringe benefit of doing that activity, because I think that if you can be more and more regular in your communication, and it's a little bit like buying when the market is down. I think the firms that can now really invest in good content and putting out videos and and getting, I used to work with a partner, and she was brilliant the way she would scan the newspapers and she would find an article that would be relevant to you. And she would write a personal email saying, hey, Ian, just came across this article today. Given our conversation 2 weeks ago, I thought you might be interested in reading it. And just those little things like that make the client believe that you're always thinking of them. Again, those fair weather friends.
And centre of mind.
Correct. Those fair weather friends who are only there when the sun is shining, but when you're there saying, I've just read an article about changing eligibility criteria for a government program. You might want to see this. Or you come across a great resource and you think some of my clients might be suitable to utilise it. Hey, here it is. Send a personal email saying, I just came across this. One of my colleagues is producing a template that you might be able to utilise, or an Excel spreadsheet that's already built with the data that you need, or whatever. So just
costs
little
you
subtle,
nothing. But costs you nothing, and it's all about that relationship building. I like that point that the law firms that are going to do well at this are going to be investing a lot into their relationships with their clients right now, because their hesitation will be just to, like everybody else, is to freeze and to work out and not to act in this sort of fight and flight mode, and instead of when the going gets tough, the tough get going. They sort of just freeze and go, what is happening, rather than, okay, we need to really focus right now on what do we need to be doing. Forget about all the roller coaster and the emotional ride, and this is happening and that's happening. Yep, sure, digest that in an hour block of your day, whenever you need to condense it. But otherwise, really focusing on what's going to benefit your firm long term with clients that are, and helping them get through this, because they will obviously remember it.
Exactly right.
And so in terms of, that sort of leadership, and just that was the other point I wanted to focus on, because you brought it up, leadership. So what sort of leadership skills, with staff, and obviously it's going to be affecting them greatly right now, having been thrown into working from home or remotely, with uncertainty, etc. They're going through, all this stuff right now. What do you see the main things that small firm owners need to be thinking about right now with leadership?
That's a really good question, and I must admit I've seen some fantastic leaders come out in the last few weeks. In fact, I had the privilege of watching a CEO of a company deliver a presentation yesterday about his staff and the effects of the virus on the business and how it's going to affect his staff, and him announcing reduction in salaries. And it was widely accepted. It was spoken from the heart. And he showed his own vulnerability. So I think authenticity at the moment is absolutely critical in your leadership skills, and utilising phrases like, I'm in this with you. And I think the critical message that he passed on was, this is not about profit protection. These measures are about survival. And if anything happens to you, it happens to me as well. And it's that joining of the pain, and saying that we're not just going to sit here and make sure we take our multi-million-dollar draws every 3 months. And by the way, those 20% of staff can leave the firm. It's the managing partner saying, if you're going to suffer, I'm suffering with you. And offering that, as I said, that I keep using the word vulnerability, but being open and honest about where the firm is at. And as I said, I've seen some really good ones, and just nail the message and have the loyalty of their people, and people who are seeing significant reductions in salary to survive, but they're working harder because the loyalty they're showing to their principals. That just says to me they got it right. So I think that authentic leadership's got to come out, and that is face-to-face. It's not emails, because the email communication can be read so many different ways. When someone sees your face and sees you deliver the message with some emotion, it's a difficult thing to do, but your people will respect you for it, and they won't respect a black and white email saying we are reducing your salaries by 25%. Get on with it. You need to get close and personal with these things. And as I said, I've seen some really good ones in the last few weeks.
And obviously, if this had happened, 20, even perhaps 10 years ago, when perhaps we only had Skype at that time, if there's any good of all this, it's the fact that we actually can communicate.
True.
Without using a Nokia 3210. Like we have the technology to be able to do this now. And so, lawyers and technology historically have not been great friends. I think we can all agree on that. But really, lawyers really need to pick up this now and realize, hey, I've got to get up to speed, with this type of technology and this way of communicating. And if there's a way of over communication is not such a bad thing. Oversharing perhaps, but over communicating, and reassuring, I suppose, a lot of these members of staff, etc., that we're going to get through this. It's just a matter of time. We'll and being confident that you'll be able to navigate through this. But these are the things that need to happen in order for us to be able to get through the other side and have jobs secured, etc. As I'm hearing a lot, everyone's taking a haircut, and more than 30 minutes now, so that's okay. But everyone's taking a haircut in the financial figurative sense, and everyone's having to tighten their belts. So as you said, as long as they realise that, hey, this is going to be. It's not a just certain people or whatnot. It's everyone is in this, and we need to all bind together. And perhaps the communication might be also along the lines that, hey, this is a really good opportunity for us to see and test ourselves in this type of environment, in this stressful environment, and see how well we can get through this. Because if we can get through this, a health and economic combined crisis, then it'd be a really good indication to the rest of the world that we are very strong and we are able to come out together and bind together and incentivize people to take initiative and any ideas let's have them, let's hear them. It's your time to shine during this time.
The last point is perfect, and again, as a business owner and seeking help, I see nothing wrong in asking help from your people. You can sit there, and some people say you sit there in the ivory tower knowing everything that's going on. The short answer is most business leaders don't. And I would strongly support any managing partner of a law firm to say to his or her people, if anyone's got any great ideas now is the time to bring them up. Because this firm needs to survive for the next 6 months. We're all in this together. I need everyone's ideas about whether it be cost savings, building more and more content, building the brand stronger, doing what is humanly possible to keep the place going. Because, as I said, you can sit there in your ivory tower thinking you know how to run the place and you've got every single button available to you at the bridge of that ship. Really, the people who are down stoking, the coal, soaking the boilers, with the coal, they actually know that they might need more grease. Those sort of things. These analogies could flow all day, but I would simply be sitting there saying, everyone in this room has more experience than me at their own job, so tell me how you can do it better.
Yeah, and if there's any clients to target, any particular industries that we can look at, because it's a very fast-moving environment. We're all in this together, and we're all having to, we'll get through this. We've got the plan in place. But if you've got any great ideas, let's have them as well. Because if there's something where we think, oh, that's fantastic, let's implement it. Whatever's going to work, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
And so cash is obviously a major issue right now, though. I'm sure that's going to be, on a lot of practice owners' minds.
Yeah.
How are they going to ensure they maximise their cash flow during this period?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a real balancing act at the moment. And I guess I'll take that question in two halves. The first half will be debt you've currently got outstanding and how you deal with that, and then the work that you do have from now on and how you manage that. So going with the former, I think you've got to be mindful that cash is extremely tight right now for clients, and you might be looking at your debtors list and you're sitting there saying, well, that's mine and I want to get it. And again, go back to the points you made, Ian. It's the times now where you need to be altruistic rather than that bulldog trying to chase your money. So again, phone call. Look, we currently have an outstanding debt. Is there a way we can work with you to ensure that is? Can we extend the payment terms? Can we put you on a payment plan? Those sort of things.
Being flexible, right?
Being flexible. However, you do need to ensure, and you need to ensure that debt is recovered. Again, it comes down to your own firm's financial viability moving forward. So I'll be on the front foot with that, and again, be open and honest and ask the questions and offer that generosity and flexibility. Again, they will remember you for it. So that sort of deals with the former. With the latter, WIP and debtors are going to blow out from now on. Yeah. So any work that you do from now on, I would say it is reasonably critical to try and get money in trust upfront. And I use the word try. Again, apply the similar principles. See how you go. However, I would suggest that if you get into matters now, particularly long-winded commercial and or litigation matters without some money in trust, without some milestones and the ability to invoice along the way, I think you're going to find you're going to be doing a lot of work, because right now WIP means nothing.
Yeah.
Cash is everything right now. And PI practitioners listening are sitting there going, well, I don't want to hear this guy anymore. I'm going to turn this off. But getting cash in the door is going to be critical, because it's the only way you can remunerate your staff, the only way you can pay your rent. WIP's not going to pay your rent. So money in trust in, again, flexible commercial terms as best as possible, and be upfront and honest about how we're going to manage these matters going forward. I would not recommend getting into long-winded speculative matters right now and then waiting for a bill to be paid in 3 months, because it's going to hurt. So
I appreciate that. That might be, just the way some particular practice areas work more, or they might be able to concentrate on bringing certain work in that, but I think for most law firms, that's applicable in that they can at least, for most transactional type of work, or even litigation, just, feeling the fibre of the fabric, so to speak, fairly quickly, and not investing, too much time into these, into something that may potentially not really bring any fruition, and at least getting, one of the things that someone told me a while ago that I always remember is, bill small, bill early, bill small, and bill often.
Correct.
So that if you're early into a matter.
Sorry, Ian, I cut you off.
Yeah, early into a matter.
Yep.
And just to take the temperature to make sure that there's not going to be any issues sort of further down the track. And usually people will sort of, you'll get a good indication fairly quickly, from a client, what their appetite is, for just that initial bill, and then not having to wait a month to then send out bills every month for then to find out, a week after that they've got an issue with it. So that could be 5 weeks, or so down the track, or even longer if you were to, start the work, last week, and then, and not build until the following month. So just taking that few sort of early steps to just take the temperature and say, we'll get underway. And if they're not using a trust account, or if don't like asking money or trust, or it's not appropriate in this particular circumstance, at least, and to say, well, in the absence of getting monies and trust, we're just going to bill. We'll bill you progressively through the matter, and what we'll do is I'll bill for this piece of work and work in discrete sort of blocks and make sure that they're aware at every stage of the process very quickly to keep that kind of money coming in, and offering credit card facilities to assist businesses. I'm sure a lot of people will be much happier to put things on their credit card right now, and that might be offering Amex, as a offering all credit, taking all credit cards, no any issues with certain fees on certain stuff. Just so we take everything, or even arranging that payment plan from a nominated credit card that they give you, and obviously with consent, making those payments, even if it's just on a weekly basis, just to keep things moving along and make sure that cash flow is moving right.
Absolutely. And look, I've actually written a few guides. I've got a guide that I call the 5 Golden Rules for Cash Flow. And
great.
And I've also got an ebook that's called the Cash Flow Recovery Kit. And one of the critical rules in there, as you said, is to bill early, bill small, bill often. But all I would say to that is to be totally upfront and honest from the start of the matter how you're going to do it. Because bill shop is the kryptonite to cash flow. If you get onto a matter and before you know it, you've got 20 grand in WIP, and then you hit your client with a $22,000 invoice, including GST, that's going to create bill shock. And they're going to push back on your bill. They're not going to pay it. They're going to have an aged debt before you know it. Whereas if you had a payment schedule of 10 times 2,000 over a period of time, and they knew it from the start, it's going to be a whole lot better for your cash flow. So,
and I'm sure that a lot of clients in this environment might have a short-term memory.
Absolutely. So, no, I think cash is going to be very important, as with every business. So where you need to take the pain, you need to consider your own expenses, because where you don't want to be is sitting there pushing your overdraft to the limit, and then having to go to the bank and being like Oliver and saying, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" And you may not get it, and then you're in a different territory. So, I
know the banks at the moment are pushing through these small business loans fairly quickly. 4% interest, and in some cases, and deferred for 6 months at least, which is fantastic. Which might be a much better position than using an overdraft right now. I suspect that maybe even a lot of people might use it to pay off their overdraft.
Yeah, and again, speak to your financial planners, because I had a conversation with a financial planner the other day, and he said that's good debt. If you got good debt, deal with the bad debt. So you use the good debt to deal with some of your bad debts, and again, exploit every opportunity you can to keep your doors open.
I know that you mentioned content before. One of these things that small businesses can do right now, and looking at the content that they can create for SEO and their for their website to rank for those sort of keywords that they're wanting to compete with right now. What do you think of that strategy right now, and knowing that it might be 3 to 6 months before that sort of stuff starts sort of paying off?
Again, I've done a lot of reading of late about how to market in an environment that's such a crisis, and it is difficult, because a lot of firms will be looking at their P&L and looking at SEO and AdWords and marketing in general, and wanting to throw the red pen at it. Again, I think that if you consider a broader marketing strategy that includes a reasonable amount of SEO and AdWord activity, I think that if you can continue to be at the top of the lists, continue to have your brand pop up on the banner ads on wherever Google places you, I think that's going to be important, that brand recognition continues to stay. I certainly wouldn't be recommending to completely cut that unless it's absolutely necessary. And even if you did cut it, I would ask that you would replace it with something else. And the something else would be probably a more direct marketing campaign to your database, which you probably should be doing anyway. I would just recommend doing it more often. So
I guess there will be, there might be clients as a result of that reach out that you were talking about. They might be saying, oh, look, we're actually not doing too bad in this environment. Or in fact, you wouldn't believe it, we've had more work in this last month than the 3 months before that. You might be surprised at what sort of clients might be doing very well in this environment.
And that's what I didn't say to you at the start. I talked about the negative. I should have spoken about the positive. There are firms that are doing exceptionally well right now. Those designated HR, IR firms doing a lot of employment advice. So, again, even in a downturn, I still strongly recommend that you must maintain a pipeline. When I do business planning with law firms, I talk about product strategy and I talk about making sure you get leads that you then turn into work. You need to ensure those are coming from somewhere. And the picking up the phone, the principal in the office like you, Ian, there's only so many phone calls you can make. And like any sales funnel, 60 calls might end up with 6 meetings, might end up in one piece of work.
Right.
You can't do that alone. You've got to augment that with a number of other strategies. So just continue your marketing as best you possibly can with the best budget you can at the moment.
And I suppose that should then filter down through staff as well to say, hey, if any spare moment you've got, please pick up the phone to the clients that you're closest with to reassure them that you're here as well, because obviously some of these, we're not going to be able to call everyone ourselves, and they're going to appreciate at least a phone call just to check in from the senior associate on the matter, or even the junior lawyer that's close, that's getting all the instructions and sort of saying, and being that nurturing experience with the firm right now, saying we are here for you when you, and being relaxed about, understand what it's like if they want to put instructions on hold, etc. But just hanging around, being there, ready when they're ready to make the decision.
Yeah, what I say there, Ian, is a simple line. Everyone in your firm is in sales.
Yeah.
The entire workforce is a sales workforce. So regardless of which part of the firm you're in, whether you're practicing or not, whether you're on reception, whether you're the managing partner, everyone's in sales. Everyone has a role. So, your point is perfect.
And I guess not to confuse like a sales role with being a salesman. It's your clients are the lifeblood of the business, right? So nurturing that and with law, it's all about relationships and it's all about being that trusted advisor. And what does that trusted advisor look like in times like this of acute stress and pressure? I think it's really something that law firms are tackling really hard, and the good ones are doing it well, I guess, right now. And I guess, and just coming back to that point with leadership with staff as well, do you suggest having those sort of catch ups with staff on a daily basis, face to face? Or
very good point. I was advising a client on their lockdown procedures, and I recommended that department heads or practice areas have what they refer to as a stand-up meeting. They usually once a day. I strongly recommend they go to twice a day. So that particular firm does it at 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. The reason why we went with that, because if you go to 9 and 5, then the difference between the 5 p.m. and the 9 a.m. is hardly anything. It's an ability to ensure that team leaders can check in, understand what their teams are doing as a collective. So you don't have to have, if you have a team of 7, you don't have to have 6 calls. You do it all together. Use Teams, use Zoom, whatever you've got. Check in, a few agenda items. What's on your plate? What hurdles do you need assistance getting over? Do you have capacity to help anyone else? And what are you going to be doing in between this meeting and the next one? So again, sort of regular check-in and ability to talk. because in the office you're sitting around each other and you're hearing.
You just go, my priorities this, my priorities that.
Correct.
Oh, I got my priorities right. I mean, this is it's a very, for a cliche, very new world, having to manage people, in an online environment where they're not visible and remote.
Yes.
I've been doing it for quite a while, so I guess I'm perhaps a little bit more seasoned to it. I'm sure it's a shock at the moment for a lot of those, partners of firms that are having to manage all these people remotely and not being physically at the office where they can see what they're doing, what they're up to, etc. And and just checking in, making sure what's going on right now. What are you working on? Without perhaps looking like appearing to be micromanaging or anything like that. It's just part and parcel of the fact that they're not there physically, not physically there, and you obviously have to increase the amount of communication as you go down those sort of levels. I've noticed, with communication through, obviously 3D, nothing beats 3D, then 2D, face-to-face, phone call, then email, then, Slack or text or whatever it might be, voicemail, etc. You lose this, 30% of the communication every level you go down. You really do lose that. And I know that lawyers have had to deal with that a lot through email and making sure that they really, getting their message across as much as they possibly can through email so that things can't be taken two ways, or whatnot. I know that a lot of people still struggle with that and haven't mastered it. It's definitely something that takes a very long time to do.
And I think that there's another important aspect for practitioners is the supervising element. And if there's one thing I've learned from the various law institutes, the Queensland Law Society in my home state, is that there is relatively little tolerance towards lack of supervision still. So those regular check-ins, particularly for senior practitioners, partners and principals, you need to be on top of the work that's still leaving the firm, because what you then don't want, particularly in an environment with such economic crisis, is to have potential professional indemnity risk. The other thing that's critical that I'm finding through the local insurers in Queensland, as Lexon, is date management, ensuring that the old date management process is well and truly front of mind. You do not want to have a client miss a cooling off period, miss a key contractual date, or miss a limitation period, whatever it might be in your system, but you simply need to be on top of dates. So that supervising element is really important, and it should come across in your regular communication. Yeah,
and that's making sure the deadlines don't get missed.
Yes, true.
It's a real risk right now. I know we're out of time, and I know that we had more questions to go through. Perhaps we'll save them for another webinar down the track. Thanks so much for your time today and talk. I know we went in a different tangent, more towards leadership and what skills people with small firms or even firms generally. Really, it's all applicable right now. Should be doing, and so it's been fantastic. I've even got some good ideas for my own law firm as a result of today's webinar. So it's fantastic to at least shoot the breeze with you about all this sort of stuff, and know that you're advising lots of law firms at the coalface and seeing what they're going through. And I know you've had to pull all-nighters and with clients and back-to-back teams meetings all today. So we really appreciate your precious time right now, and obviously your expertise and comments and suggestions. I'm sure everyone's got a lot out of it. I really appreciate it.
Ian, it's my absolute pleasure. We're all in this together, and I think the way to fight through is to stand side by side. So more than happy to take calls from anyone listening, and happy to help as much as I can. And let's just get through this.
And if people want to have a chat with you about even just sort of navigating this short period, just go to your website, lawganised.com.au.
Absolutely, yep. Or ben.deverson@lawganised.com.au. Happy to take any calls or emails. Very happy to help.
So email ben.deverson, DEVERSON @lawganised.com.au.
That's the name.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to know that there's someone else out there helping law firms like yourself.
Great. Thanks for that, Ian, and good luck to everyone.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye now.